Well, over the last week, we've kind of heard from very upset, very troubled St. Paul in the first 6 chapters to the Corinthians, very upset with their pettiness, with the I belong to Paul or I belong to Apollos or the two fighting together, the rich taking advantage of the poor. So there was a lot of that critique and a lot of promotion of the unity that should exist amongst the Corinthians community. But as we enter into chapter 7 now, we get a different tone and actually a more positive tone. You have to remember that St. Paul in this letter is responding to a letter that he received from them. So this first letter that we call to the Corinthians is St. Paul's response to a previous letter that they sent him. Now, unfortunately, that letter is lost in time. We don't know what the contents of that letter is. And so scholars, those smart people out there, they make educated guesses based on what St. Paul is writing to them as to what the contents of this letter is all about. And so in chapter 7 and in the rest of the letter to chapter 15, we also see a group of people who are striving for the virtue and striving for the perfection that St. Paul is seeking from the Corinthians. That there are some people in the community who want to do the right thing, but they don't know what that is. And so there's going to be several topics that we're going to address. But today, the topic is St. Paul. We know you're a promoter of chastity, and we know that, the culture and lifestyle of the Corinthians around us, especially in terms of human love and that type of thing. We know that we should avoid the practices of the Corinthians around us, but we still don't know what to do. Should we marry? Should we not marry? What is your opinion on this? And so this is very important as we look quickly at St. Paul's response to the question of marriage or not marriage. What does St. Paul do at the beginning of this reading? He says what? He says, this is not a commandment, but this is my personal opinion. Okay? Very important as we read the contents of this. St. Paul is given his advice. He's given what he sees how they should live and how Christians should live. But it's not necessarily a commandment. Because as St. Paul admits, that within his direction and his advice, that there might be some people that cannot live this type of lifestyle. Just like Jesus says, in terms of celibacy and chastity in the Gospels, that not all called to this life. And so St. Paul's basic answer, the nuts and bolts of it, the meat and potatoes of his answer to the Corinthians in regards to should they marry or should they not marry, is along these lines. If you're married, stay married. If you are not married, remain unmarried. If you're a widower, stay a widow. But if you, again, as he says, but if you feel, you can't live that type of lifestyle, then go ahead and get married. But all this at the very end of the passage is saying this, that St. Paul wants the people to live a life dedicated to someone. That's the key in all this. St. Paul gives his promotion for virginity and for celibacy. He promotes that type of lifestyle. Why? Because those living that lifestyle are dedicated to the things and affairs of the Lord. That's the privilege he has as a man who is celibate. He is not married. He understands that his life and his dedication solely to the Lord, but if one is married, then what does he say? Well, now you have to be dedicated to the affairs of your family, which is, again, a good thing and a thing that he's telling them to attend to. But notice that if one wants to be fully dedicated to the things of God, it's better that one does not marry. Again, St. Paul's advice, not a commandment. But the key, again, as I said in all this, whether you're married or celibate, life is not about satisfying one's own wishes and desires. Whenever you read Scripture and you read the heroes and the figures and the people in sacred Scripture, you never hear them. It's never a story about them following their dreams. There's no story about that. It's almost every story of God calling them and telling them that, I have something for you to do for me. And that's the key and secret to life. It's not about, one's own pursuits and dreams. It's always oriented towards the other, whether it's to God himself or whether it's to one's own spouse and one's own family. Either way, have your thoughts and your concerns and your affairs directed towards another. May God bless you.